Holly, thank you so much for joining me. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Morgan.
I don't think I've seen you for what's it been, 9 years now?
That
Am I
sounds right.
something like that? So
Uh-huh.
I'm in Indiana. You're in Los Angeles. Last time I saw you, you were in Chicago for a short stint, and then you moved back to LA. And gosh, things have happened since then. So fill me in on everything that I've missed. First of all.
Well, what brought me to Chicago, which will be relevant to your audience, is I thought that um, I could become a theater actor and I wouldn't have to worry about the cost of living like I had to worry about in LA. I thought, well, nobody wants to live in cold weather, so Chicago's bound to be cheaper. And it wasn't. It was still very pricey. And when I was in Chicago, I think I spent the first month just going to plays and being totally blown away by the incredible talent in that city. Um, and I had moved out to Chicago right after being a Hollywood assistant. So I was working on a really high powered executive's desk, and it was 2015, and I was making $40,000 a year, which is nothing.
That's
So
crazy.
yeah, and I was working crazy hours too. And I was a good Hollywood assistant, I have to say that. But I didn't have much money. And so time was ticking and I was trying to figure out how I'd make the actress plan work. And I thought, well, I could live in like a up and coming neighborhood. And so I had just looked at an apartment complex for, there was someone who referred me to somebody else and she was lovely. And the complex it was actually a house. And so I would share, one floor of the house. And, you know, there was talk about this neighborhood, which is Logan Square. And this was 10 years ago, but it being dangerous and that there was some gang activity. And I thought, oh, well, that's okay. I think I'll be fine. I can handle it.
No, it's
So
not okay.
Well, I
It's
learned
not.
that the following weekend. I learned that the following weekend I was networking because I knew I needed to get a job, having not much savings. And so I was connecting with friends of friends, and someone had invited me to a charity event. And I said, yeah, I'll go. So this was in Humboldt Park. And I remember going on, the Blue Line station in Wicker Park, which was where I was staying. By the way, I was staying with a friend of a friend, paying $500 a month, which was really lucky. But again, I'm staying with literally strangers. And so, anywho, I got to the station and I remember going, I need to go to Humboldt Park to one of the, attendants. And she looked at me and she said, I don't, you might want to take a taxi or drive there. And I said, really? And she said, yeah, that neighborhood isn't safe to walk around. By the time you get to where you need to go, you'll have to walk some distance and it's not safe. So I said, okay. So I got in
Oh,
my car.
that's actually really nice that she even said that to you. You know.
Well, well, it gets worse. I mean, you would think that that would have triggered something in my head, but growing up in a small town in Indiana, which is we have that in common. We met at university at Ball State. So, and even LA is relatively safe, especially because I was living in the Pacific Palisades and the West Side. And so I got in my car and drove to this charity function thinking I would meet my next employer. And I had a good time, and it was still dusk. And as I was leaving, um, there were some kids. And granted, I have a background in education. We've worked on children's theater together. So kids, that's something I know a kid, whether they're in high school or middle school or elementary school, I understand their mentality. So I
Yeah.
heard some kids kind of being rowdy as as I was trying to get my car to leave. And I didn't think anything of it. And I get in my car, and all of a sudden, they trapped me. One was on a bike, and then there were two others, and they had a gun. And all
Oh
I,
no.
yeah, this is real. This is me networking. This really happened. So I freak out because one, I had just moved from LA and didn't have much with me. And like all I had, and this people laugh, but I had my Prada bag and my Prius. That's all I had. I really didn't have much. And that Prada
That's
bag
so
was in the pack. So
LA.
LA. I still have that bag, by the way, and it's the only designer bag I have. So I remember these kids trying to open up my car, and I thought, these mother effers have no idea what I've just been through. They are not going to get the best of me. So I didn't care who was behind me, who was in front of me, or who was on the side of me. I knew my car doors were locked, and I just quickly like went into reverse and went really fast out of that parking lot. And I remember thinking they're going to shoot my car, but they didn't. I had that fear. But at that point, I said, you know what? It's not worth it. I'm going to get a regular job and I'm going to work in Lincoln Park. And so, or I'm going to live in Lincoln Park and I'm going to get a regular job. And so that was it. That was really the last time I thought about acting. I did end up teaching some acting classes in the Hancock building right on Michigan Avenue, which was amazing. So I got to do that. And I was still close enough to it where I remembered all the gazillion classes I had took during my time in LA. But I ended up working at a startup and working in tech, and that's what I do today. So it ended up working out, but you know there was a networking component that I had to take from my days in LA as an actress and apply that to um, my professional life as well, and it paid off.
So your story there actually reminds me of a story involving both of us from 22 years ago. Tell me if you remember this. So
Okay.
I was living in Van Nuys, like sleeping on the floor of this 2 bedroom apartment, sharing it with a roommate that I had met, the day of move in,
Uh huh.
and I was I was actually so it was 2004. It was about this time of year. It was about January ish, February ish, and I was location scouting for a short film that I was doing. And I come back from location scouting and I can't get to my apartment. Everything is roped off from every side
Oh,
of my block.
I remember.
And there's police tape everywhere. There's police cars, ambulances, all this stuff. And so I finally, I parked down the block and I walked to my apartment. And my roommate tells me that the neighbors across the way, like the next building down from us, there was a family that had been shot and killed by gang members, and it was a mother, a father, and 2 kids, and so for about a week or two after that, there was candles burning on the doorstep of that apartment complex, and it must have been just the day after this happened. You and I were going somewhere to some event or party or something, and doing this networking thing. And you were always so good about like finding people to network with, and I just kind of tagged along. But we start walking down the sidewalk, and there's like a group of teenagers that at nighttime they all look like gang members to me, and we had to
Yeah.
go like literally through this circle of people standing in front of the crime scene, and then there was another point a couple blocks away where we had to also pass by some shady looking people, and I I just remember thinking like, man, it's nighttime, it's Van Nuys, we're like the only white people around here. We're gonna get jumped, like there's literally gang activity everywhere. Um, and I just remember like feeling the fear that night, and luckily nothing happened, but no guns or anything that time. Do you remember
Yes,
that?
I do. I remember you talking about that happening. And I remember thinking like, why did he choose Van Nuys? Like I
I'll
did. Like,
tell you
that
why,
wouldn't
because
have occurred to me.
when you're moving from Indiana to Los Angeles, you're literally looking at like apartments.com, and you're looking at all the
Yeah.
listings, like, holy cow, this place is half the price of everything else. And you
Yeah.
look at the map and you're like, oh, it's only 6 miles away from where I'm going to go every day. Perfect spot for me. cheap,
Yeah,
close.
I
Turns out
was
6 miles
lucky.
is a 40-minute drive.
Yeah, I had a actually the family that I nannied for, their daughter moved out to study at Santa Monica College, and her brother had lived in LA for quite some time. So they had found where we were going to live, and he knew the area. But that's always what impressed me about you, Morgan, is that you just always seem to figure it out. And you were a little bit of a loner in the process, where I always seem to make a friend out of a stranger, and maybe that's what made us a good combination is that
Yeah, no
you
kidding.
could figure out anything, and I had no problem asking for help when I needed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I use intuition way too much, I guess, because it does it does hold me back from, I'd say, advancement or meeting the right people, networking, that kind of thing. Because um, I will always default to I can figure it out.
Right,
So uh, so that really kind of closes up my world to where maybe I'm not meeting all the people that could help me on a film or help me advance my career or give me the next job opportunity or something like that. So um, but you, on the other hand, it was like you moved out to LA, I want to say a year before I did. And
that's right.
and then by the time I got out there, it was like you knew everybody in town. And I was like, geez, Holly. So,
That's about right. Yeah.
so what was your yeah, what was your mentality when you first moved out there? Because I don't think you knew anybody when you arrived.
No, I mean, I guess that's my great story. And I appreciate you reminding me of that. Life doesn't stop once you reach a certain age or you move on to a different career path. And I also think necessity is the greatest source for invention, or even
Yeah,
desperation, however you want
yeah,
to put that. So I knew a friend of a friend. I had sang and danced at shows at Holiday World Splash and Safari in Santa Claus, Indiana. And one of my castmates, his aunt was a actress, and she wrote and starred in Tony and Tina's Wedding. And so she came to one of our shows back in 2000 and the summer of 2000. And that I thought, well, I know somebody that lives in LA for what that's worth. And so I remember just getting in contact with her, and that led to me doing theater shows in the Pacific Palisades and meeting all those children's parents. And um, some of them were in the industry. One of them was a photographer and took my first set of headshots. And that gave me a community and a home base to kind of function within. And then I remember got locked out of my apartment, and there were two girls, going up the stairs. And I said, I'm locked out and I need help, whereas you would have said, I can figure this out. I just kind of became a damsel in distress. And that girl actually just came and stayed here last weekend.
oh wow.
So it's been over 20 years. Yeah, but she said, I'll help you. And so they let I forget how we figured it out. I think eventually we found a man that also lived in the building, and we probably knocked on doors together, and he had a credit card and he was able to get me in. But we became friends ever since. And she had said to me, Holly, she was British, and she said, Holly, you need a job where you're going to meet people and you can network. Who's ever an actress listening to this British accent, like, no,
No,
judges.
dude, that
I'm
was
not
awesome.
I'm not not trying out for any no coward plays in the future. But she basically said, you need to work somewhere where you can be seen. Look at Ashley Judd. She worked at the Ivy, and that's where she was discovered. So I said, okay. And she worked at the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills in their restaurant, and there was a job that was opening up in the bar. And that was even more advantageous because that's where, um, celebrities, I'll give you an example. I want to look up his name. Sebastian was a waiter there at the time, and he is now, and I saw him on Regis and Kelly saying the same thing, that the Four Seasons at that time was the place to go. And so the person, Sebastian Maniscalco, is that his, I think I just butchered his last name, Sebastian Maniscalco. He was a waiter, and now he's doing movies with, starring in movies with Robert De Niro. So I'm not making this up. It was the place to be. And so I quickly got thrown into the Hollywood um, scene through that job. And that was really the game changer. But I will say that I'm grateful that I began my roots in the Palisades, because that's an eventually what I aspired to kind of model my life after, as opposed to kind of the livelihoods that I was seeing from these new acquaintances in Hollywood. You know, there were two ways to live your life, and I chose the more wholesome path. And I think that served me in the long
Yeah,
run.
I always liked the Palisades too. That same film that I was location scouting for, I was actually in talks with some house that was, I think
I
it was
told
either
you
under,
about that house. I
yeah,
told you
yeah.
about the house. I
That house
remember
was so cool, and that was my first time in the Palisades, was when you took
I
me to
said
that.
this is where you should film it. And now that house is gone. So as you know, I mean, we just had these brutal wildfires that I guess are a once in a lifetime natural disaster. And it totally wiped out that community that I was still visiting, you know, 5 times a year, because that photographer that I had mentioned earlier who had taken my headshots, I became really um, close friends with his wife. And so she, you know, the short of the long of it is I would go back and watch their cats and their house when they would go away. And so that still was a, a familiar place, and a place I identified with, and also a place that carried a lot of memories from being an actress. And, you know, there was a lot of times you know, on your way to success, there's some falls, right? And then you have to get back up. And so to be able to go back and revisit the streets that I, you know, was where I really felt like I was stomping, it had a very special place in my heart. And I was grateful I was able to go back and kind of reacclimate with that place as an adult.
Yeah, you spent a lot of time in the Palisades. I remember you were living there for a while, right? You were,
I did. That was, I mean, that was the other piece of networking, is that you're not just you know, trying to find people that might want to work with you, but you're also figuring out living situations. And so I lived there for over 10 years in two different people's guest house. And the first um, place I stayed, I spent $550 a month. And even back in 2004, 2005, like that was incredible. People were like, what? You're living in the Palisades for $550 a month? Now, granted, I would babysit every once in a while, but that's a part of networking. And then I found another great place probably about 5 years later, and I was spending $750 a month, and I was in a guest house. And I was nice, you know, so that's the other thing. People don't always just need the money. I mean, they'd rather have someone that they're not, you know, that they feel safe around too. So that worked to my
that's a
advantage.
very nice way of putting
Yeah,
it. um, all right, so the house that you stayed in, though, and the fires that just happened, I'm assuming
yeah.
it's a
The
loss.
house is gone. The house is gone. We've started a GoFundMe, which, if you know any of you are inclined to donate to, it would mean a lot to me and the family who's lost their home and all their belongings. It's just been so surreal. the past 3 weeks now, I finally am getting on the other side of grief. I was trying to figure out what my lesson was in all of this, and it's really gratitude. And that's a practice I'm learning that it doesn't come naturally being a human just to, oh, well, I'm going to be grateful now. And then it's not like that just sticks. And so you have to kind of practice being grateful and making that a part of your core values, I guess. But I also, there's survivor's guilt. And I felt like, well, why did those people were so wonderful the way that they really built me up and helped me become the woman I am today by just modeling being a good person? Why did it have to happen to them? And maybe this is, look, I don't want to speak to what their life lessons are in all of this, but for me, I can say that it took me so long to have a life now that I feel like I'm surrounded with resources, whether it's, a social life, or I'm taking 3 sets of dance classes at the Colborne School down the street. I live in downtown LA now. Excuse me. I live in downtown LA now, so I can go to the Colburn School and take those classes. And I have a lovely husband. I can travel. So I have this really great life now. And so I know what that's like to not have anything. I kind of talked about that starting over point in Chicago.
Yeah.
And when you're acting, you don't have a lot either. And some people would say that's the sacrifice you make for your craft. And there's this little fantasy, I think, that especially coming from a small town in Indiana, it became like this fantasy was a mental safety net, where it was like, well, I'll become rich and famous and all this won't matter anyway. And when that doesn't happen in the way that you kind of forecast as a child, that can be really disappointing. And then trying to figure out how to stay in a city that is very expensive, where you don't have the support of your parents, you quickly have to figure it out. And there's a lot of sacrifices you have to make. Um, and so I have already had that lesson of having to kind of work for everything I have. And I'm really grateful I don't have to do that again, because that is really can be exhausting and
Yeah. Yeah.
scary, quite frankly. So I really feeling it for my friends. It wasn't just their friends who lost their, it wasn't just my friends who lost their home. It was all of their friends. It was multiple families I babysat for. So there's like at least 10 families I can count on my fingers that lost their house in the Palisades, and then 2 over in Altadena. And if there's anything we can do to help them, starting the GoFundMe was just one way I could give back, because the woman in the family, she taught me when it was time, like we had a recession in LA. So back in 2008, I had finally reached like the pinnacle of all my networking, everything had paid off, and then there was a recession. And you might, if you're thinking about moving out to LA, you might think, oh, well, that already happened. I'm glad that didn't happen to me. Well, these things are cyclical. You'll have a, writer's strike, you'll have a pandemic, you'll have wildfires. These things set the industry back because there's people that are, running these industries. And so, 9/11 was another setback that I was able to avoid because of when I moved out. But the point I'm trying to make is, and when the recession happened in 2008, I needed to get a real job. And so I, my friend Nicole, who I mentioned earlier, his husband is a photography teacher and all the things, and he'd taken my headshots. She taught me how to use a fax machine. She brought me in as an office assistant. She taught me how to assist a psychiatrist, and I was studying educational psychology at the time. But there were little skills that she had taught me along the way that helped me kind of build that agency to now be who I am. So, anywho, I'm trying to give back.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot in there that I'd like to unpack a little bit. And
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
before we move on, that link to the GoFundMe will be in the show notes. So anybody who would like to throw in for that, just hit that link in the show notes. Um, so, gosh, okay, let's start with those survival jobs, and I want to comment on the setting back and everything too. It's really hard to um, it's easy to start over when you're crashing on somebody's floor, or taking up a spare bedroom, or something like that. But like you said, when you have a family and a house, and you've like set things up, and you've kind of arrived at where you want, that's your status quo, and then something like a wildfire wipes it all out, that is a huge reset, and very hard to recover from. So yeah, those families, anything we can do to help would be great. But those survival jobs. So I remember you working at the Four Seasons. I remember you would run into famous people all the time. The one that sticks out in my head is Brittany Murphy.
Oh yeah,
You.
it's funny you remember that. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting sick right now. Yeah, yeah. So you were right there in the midst of Hollywood being Hollywood, and off camera, how people were, and everybody's coming in and out of there. So how do you turn something like a host at a restaurant or a hotel into something where you're actually meeting people, and making meaningful connections? Like how do you go from there to there?
Well, I mean, this was before me too. So there was a lot of confusion on my part being 22 years old and thinking this person is going to help me find work, and they had something else in mind. And so there were a lot of times where I was showing up at producer and directors' homes that I had met through that job and end up on their couch and be like, whoa, what is happening? Like, really not knowing that, you know, they had something else in mind. Um, and that was disappointing because you think, I don't like this guy. I thought he was going to help me learn. Um, and so I would say that a lot of the people I met through the Four Seasons, they tended not to actually pan out in terms of helping me get work. But I did learn that there was, I was so in the public eye for so long in that job. I think I had it for 2 years. And I thought, well, I don't want these people to think like at some point I just would become the hostess at the Four Seasons. And so I
Yeah,
stopped that job because I wanted them to see me in a different light.
right,
Um,
right.
and I remember like I was still networking on the side too in other ways where it would be an opportunity to run into, um, producers who I had met. Like, for example, was a casting intern with Monica Swan, and they were doing a lot of movies with John Davis and Fox. So, like Roll Bounce and Garfield. And so I remember through that, you know, internship, I had gotten an opportunity to audition for John Davis, and I had seen him at the Four Seasons. And so it was a way for us to reconnect, which was great. And he didn't know my name, but he would say, "Oh, hey," he would recognize my face. So I would say that was a great way, like in terms of really doing business, like it was a great way to kind of meet people and then know who they were, like see and be seen. But nothing substantial came out of working there. And like Sebastian, he was always I remember like my last name used to be Benelli. I'm Italian. So I would have remembered someone who was Italian. I think that's the other thing is don't just network with the people that are dining there, but Sebastian was a waiter. Like if I was smart, I would have been networking with him too.
Yeah.
Um, and so he was a little bit older than me, which I think was the disconnect. But I would just say you never know in terms of who's going to pop. But I was pretty good at like, I was taking all the classes too. So, like, there was the internship at the casting office, there was the job where, it was a big Hollywood scene and I was meeting people. I was taking class at Improv Olympics, and there were scene study classes with casting directors that I was taking, and there were workshops that I was taking. And so, um, I would meet people there too. And it was like the people I was gravitating towards, the Groundlings is another place, they would pop. And found work in some degree. So they would see that in me, or we were knowing about the same parties. And so there's something to be said for that, is that you can all kind of come up together. So I would say, don't just invest in doing the classes, don't just invest in doing the internship, don't just invest in having the job at a, sceney Hollywood scene. You kind of have to do all of it. And looking back, I was true to myself. I think I wasn't ever trying to be anything that I wasn't. There were times where I remember one of my friends said, "Oh, he was like a person I'd done a short film with, and he actually ended up working quite a bit. Um, but he was like, "You're changing. You're turning into like a Hollywood. You're turning into really Hollywood." And I thought, who the hell? I'm just, like, I'm moving up in the world. So I think I came by that innocently, and that I kind of fell into that trap. But again, I had that community in the Palisades that ended up anchoring me. But you'll learn, especially actresses, is like, it's hard not to get caught up in the scene. Um, but if you have those core values in place before you make the move, those will ground you. And then ultimately, I think I realized that becoming famous, for the sake of becoming famous, no longer interested me. I really wanted to be good at my craft. There was a family that I babysat for in the Palisades, and their dad was a music producer. And in front of the son's kind of desktop where he studied, there was a quote, and it said, "More than being famous, more than being rich, I want to be great." And it was some take on um, Bruce Springsteen and his
That's
approach to his
really
art.
great. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
something I wish I would have known and hung on to in my 20s, because I think you and I both kind of hit a wall at the same time, and maybe you won't call it hitting a wall, but like in the mid 20 teens, um, you and I kind of both dipped out of Hollywood in our own little ways. Like you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like you stopped pursuing acting as much as you were before. And I stopped making movies. I was, for as long as I can remember, I mean, like literally since fourth grade, all I wanted to do was make movies. And just backstory on me, in 2008 and 2009, I had two films and a documentary all come out, and then one other documentary that I basically directed but didn't get the director credit. um, so I had like four movies all come out within a year and a half or 2 years, and I was like, dude, for sure, the door is open. Everything got
right.
distribution. I was like, yep, I'm on the radar now. Phone's going to start ringing any minute, and it never did. And then I was like, well, at least my films are out there. I'm going to make some money, and I never did, because I got in with some distributors that either didn't make money or cooked the books or whatever, and I never made a dime off my movies. And so I took a pause, and I thought, the one film that I would say was the production value was bigger and better than the rest. It was called My Name Is Jerry.
Uh-huh.
That film, um, was kind of like my pride and joy, and I spent almost 4 years on it, and really devoted that 4 years to making this movie happen, like regardless of everything else going on in my life. And when it didn't make me money and it didn't kick open any doors, and I lost some friends in the process because they misunderstood some things about,
Mhm.
you know, just to go into a little bit of detail, nobody got paid, right? Except for some of the actors up front and some of the department heads, but all the crew members and stuff, they were volunteering and hoping for, some payment on the back end or whatever, couple hundred, couple thousand, whatever, when the movie got distributed. But nobody got paid, including me, and I was blamed for it by a lot of my friends that volunteered their time on the film. They thought that I screwed them over, but I had nothing to do with that. And so I lost friends, I lost money, I lost 4 years of my life, and I had zero opportunities. And I was like, man, what am I doing this for? And then right after that, it was like, the Me Too movement and all this, like all these bad actors in Hollywood. And I don't mean actors, but I mean like, people being bad. And it just, to me, it soured the industry for me. And it was
Yeah.
at the same time that you stopped pursuing all of that. And
Well, yeah, you get heartbroken. I mean, I don't think there's another way to say it than heartbroken. You just feel like it defeats you. And I'm strong. I mean, I know I'm strong. That's one of my strengths. I want to say one thing though about you, Morgan, is when I went to do that job in Chicago, at that point I was back on my feet. I was living in Lincoln Park and had a job in tech. I mean, I wasn't well off by any means, but I remember I came to, um, don't
South
tell
Bend.
me, South
Uh,
Bend to do a film, and you paid me. And I did not expect to get paid. And I said, "Oh, Morgan, you don't have to, because you had just had two kids and you don't have to pay me." And you said, "No, I want to." So, you know, I just know that that's not your character. And I wanted to say that. I mean, I think there's also something to be said about, again, many jobs and trying to stay creative while you're not working as an actor. I was doing those theater shows and we did
yeah.
Super Diaper Baby. And I remember Morgan called me and he said, "Hey," and I said, "Okay, I'm doing this show. I'm directing kids. I have no idea what I'm doing. I need your help." And you just kind of laughed like you did now. And you came to the rescue and you taught me how to direct the show. I don't think I think I was able to take you out to lunch to Lemonade, and the chicken was cold. It wasn't even cooked. Remember that? And
No, I don't.
oh, I remember that because I thought, well, at least I can buy this guy lunch. I mean, that's what we're talking about in terms of desperation. So I think if your idea of going out to Hollywood is, you're going to be rich and famous, you're in for, you know, a real shock in that there's a lot of hustle that goes into it. I would say it's worth it. I'm grateful I had a mom that had said to me, like when I had turned 30, there's a point where you grow out of getting those entry level jobs. And so
Yeah.
I remember I was studying theater um, at a really cool, it was Pacific Residence Theater in Venice. And I really, at that point, was trying to perfect my craft and really train as a performer. And there was a lady there, I don't want to say her name, but she was much older than me. And I remember her eating yogurt with a pen. She didn't have a spoon, so she took the end of a pen and was eating. And I was like, oh my God. Like, granted, I have kind of now am reset expectations that I might not be famous, but I didn't. I was in this theater with no heat. We were all in coats and cold because there's no heat. and she's eating with the pen, and I just thought, I don't want to end. She was a great actress, so I thought I want to be like her as from an artist standpoint, but I don't want to be, you know, a bohemian. It was no longer cute. And so that's when I ended
Yeah.
up becoming a Hollywood assistant
Well,
and
and
getting that
at
more
some point
lessons.
too, you grow out of crashing on people's couches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You have to have that honest talk with yourself. Am I gonna pop in the next year or two, or is this it? And am I going after the wrong thing? For me, it was starting a family after all of this, and and I just remember making the decision that if I do anything further in film, it's going to be as a hobby, not as a career or potential career, because um, it was taking so long, and I felt like the amount of effort that you put in does not equal the amount of
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's
yeah,
exactly right.
because you can hustle, you can put in all the work, you can stay up, you can write a dozen scripts, you can just kill it, and
Yes.
at the end of the day you're still waiting on the right person at the right bus stop or whatever to bump into you and just make that magical moment happen where it's like you're prepared and the opportunity knocked. And but I didn't have time to wait
Well,
anymore. I had to for
yeah.
family.
There was a professor that we both know at Ball State. His name is Roger Smith. And I remember when I was in his acting for the camera class, I don't know if it was my junior or senior year, but he said, I remember this because I'm a good listener, but he said, if you don't have family that can basically bankroll you while you're out there, good luck.
Yeah.
And I don't think he meant to say it in that way, but I think that was probably one of the wisest things he ever said. Um, and it probably came just, that wasn't what he was just being real. Um, And I think that was our case, Morgan. And as a female, I mean, I had a choice. I could have, and I'm saying this because I think it's important for females, women to hear, young women. There is that point where you say, okay, I could sell my soul for this, but it wasn't worth it. Um, and I'm really glad I made that choice. I wisened up and I was resourceful, and there were things I could do other than acting. And I would say that's the case for you too, Morgan. Though, if I would have heard somebody say this to me when I was 20, I would be like, oh, well, they didn't make it, so why am I even listening to them? But
Yeah.
yeah, but the industry, it changes. I mean, that's the other thing is that when I got on the scene, reality TV became a thing. And granted, I could have done that. But again, there was the family I was babysitting for in the Palisades, and they said, don't do that. You're going to end up, just making a fool of yourself, and they're going to make money off of that. And so
Yeah.
I was grateful that I got that advice. And so then I was dealing with reality TV show, there was things that it's just like I remember I went on a audition with, and this was kind of in the 2010, so I was wise. And one of my friends who was an actor, it was an Ava Longoria um, produced show, and they wanted me to make out with a blow up doll, and I said, I am not doing that. You really want me? Would you do that? Like, I got pissed, and I had a voice at that point. So you end up developing this voice. And I think that's why I was attracted to acting, is because I had a voice through these other characters. They were saying things that I would never say. And then I developed this voice. And I said, no, I absolutely will not do that. And then I think they asked me to do something, and I was like, I'm not a monkey. And my friend who brought me in just to be his sidekick, he was like, blowing this for me. I thought this is like this a real opportunity. I was like, I'm not doing it. So, and he did call me afterward and he's like, you did the right thing. He ended up being a priest, by the way. He's now a
Oh
preacher.
wow, wow.
Yeah, but it's just like, so, look, at the end of the day, I gained so many priceless skills from that experience. I did work. I was on Ugly Betty, which was an interesting experience. I was on Entourage, which was a great experience, and remember being in the van with like Adrian Grenier and Kevin Connolly. And so that was really cool. And I got to go to Puerto Vallarta and do Beverly Hills Chihuahua, which was super fun. So I had these really great experiences of being on
Yeah.
set. I remember Chris Rock's brother was on a show I was in, and Debbie Allen was the director. And I remember watching her as Felicia Rashad's sister on The Cosby Show growing up, and me thinking, oh, I love her. I really want to work with her one day. And she was the director of the show. And Chris Rock's brother, which I can't remember his name, but he was a star of the show. And I remember he had a photographic memory. I thought that was, he said, I don't have to worry about memorizing lines. I just know him. So he was an interesting guy. And he said, have you ever seen this show? I didn't have a TV. I mean, like I was broke. I said, no, and that was before you could get shows online. Like you couldn't
Yeah.
just, so I said, no, I've not seen it. And it was like a party scene. And he announced to the whole set and all the extras, we've got a girl on the set who's never seen the show. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then, another thing happened where I was on a movie, the final season, like this was my big break. I really felt like I've made it. And that was with Ashton, Sean
Ashton.
Astin, Sean
Ah,
Astin, who had been in the Goonies. So when I was a
yeah.
kid, I remember saying, oh, I want to be in a movie with him. And now I'm playing his love interest. And again, I feel like these things from my childhood, I kind of manifested. I had the energy to do that. And I got cut out of that movie. And I
Oh
remember I
no.
was at the Dubai Film Festival promoting this, that I was my big break. And I was on the first class flight, just got off of Emirates, which was, see, so you have these incredible experiences. Got to JFK, and as I'm going to my connecting flight, I get a call from a producer, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I call him back, and he says, I want to let you know we had to cut you, had nothing to do with your performance. The movie was just too long, and we needed to cut a part of the storyline. And you would have thought that I lost my mother or a family member. I cried in first class all the way back to LA. And so, it's just a lot of very high highs and very low lows. Um, and that roller coaster life, you just kind of, it stops becoming exciting. It just becomes like, and then I would say one more thing is, and I learned this from one of the families I babysat for. Her husband was a showrunner. He created a really amazing show. I don't want to out these people, so I don't like, I'm
Yeah,
very,
no,
very careful because I knew them in a personal context. It
yeah.
wasn't like I knew them in a professional context. So she said that she was an actress in New York, and she said that she always felt like if she had just practiced so hard, or if she had just done everything right, that they couldn't pass her up. And when her husband was auditioning actors for this show that we all know and love, there were so many great actors that didn't get the part, and it was just because they didn't fit the the imagination of the show creator, the directors.
Mm, yep.
And so she learned at that point you could be the best actor in the world and still not work. And I think that's what got to me, was like, what? Like I can be the best that there is and it still not work? Like that,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because
yeah. So
I'll tell you from the other side of that, when I was auditioning for some of my films, I'd be sitting in these casting calls, and I'd have actor after actor audition. I saw some performances by people I've never met before, just unknown young actors, and those performances are like engraved in my brain, like outstanding performances, actors that I would love to work with, but I couldn't cast them because they weren't right for the part. They weren't right for the movie. One
So
of my
Morgan,
actors, there was a guy that auditioned for My Name Is Jerry, my first like
yeah,
big film. There was this guy named Patrick that came in and auditioned, and he was like probably my second favorite audition out of this 3 day casting session,
yeah.
and he was amazing. Did not get the part because he wasn't right for the movie, but 2 years later, I wrote a script for him, and he was the lead actor in that movie because his audition stuck in my head, and it was like, man, he's so good. It'd be such a shame not to ever use him. So
I auditioned for your film and you didn't
yeah,
cast me, and I was pissed
yeah,
because
yeah,
I with that like I went through my agent to get the
yeah,
audition. Like I wasn't just like, "Hey, here's my VHS. I hope you like
yeah.
it." Or here, I think we had at that point DVDs. We weren't no longer on VHSs, but I remember you didn't cast me, and I thought, I can't believe he wouldn't cast me. Like, I need this so bad. He knows me. He directed me at Ball State, which when we did do VHSs, or you gave me a really little
Yeah.
cassette from your
Yes.
camera.
Yep.
And I didn't what so why didn't I get it? I want to know. Why didn't you cast me?
Yeah. And that was for also for My Name Is Jerry.
Yeah.
Uh, so there were producers and casting directors that had the ability to completely trump my calls, and there was a couple people that I fought for, and they are not in the movie. And
Yeah.
so some of that was just beyond my control, and some of it is, again, back to the whole, like, you're not just casting one role, you're casting an ensemble. And so it's like you're trying to imagine the interactions between everybody as they're coming in. And, before you cast anybody, let's say you've got 8 roles, you've got 8 unknowns. So go back to, algebra class in high school. Imagine an equation with 8 variables. It's insane. And so to try to balance it all out to where it's like, you know this guy would be good with this girl, but he's not very good with his best friend, who I really want this guy for. So if I get this guy as the best friend, then he'll match with that. And it's just like you're just sitting there like playing chess in your mind, and just trying to get all the pieces lined up. It's fun, but it's heartbreaking, because uh, in film you got to kill your babies all the time. You know,
Right.
you got to cut the scenes you love. You gotta not cast actors that you love. You gotta, God, it's just you're constantly killing your babies. Actually, back to Roger Smith, our Ball State professor. One thing that he repeated 32 times on the set of My Name Is Jerry was, um, he tells this story about his kid potty training, and he's sitting on his little potty chair, and he does his number two, and he stands up and he turns around, and he's looking at it, and he's like, I did it, he's so excited, look what I made, and Roger's like, it could be the thing that you're most excited about, but it's still a piece of shit.
Yeah.
you know so he would always tell that story. So that goes into, cutting scenes, and rewriting scripts, and things like that, where you
I you
just
know, I understand. It's the nature of the business, but I don't, what I don't want is for people to kind of hear this and say, well, why try? It's so hard. And I'm hopeful
yeah,
that, you still have that spark in you where there's something urging you that you have, you got to do this. You have to kind of get it out of your system, as my mom would say. And I wholeheartedly believe in that. I would say go for it, follow your heart, and don't be so attached to the destination, but along the way, always, give it your best and do it your all. And, you know, that's where your destiny kind of comes into play if you're continuing to follow your heart, and you're continuing to give it all your all, then you're bound to, you know, end up where you're supposed to land and become the man or the woman you were meant to be. And so I'm a great example of that, in that I moved out here, and it's a wonderful place to live if you can make it work. And I'm so grateful of the person I become. And it's a great story now that whenever I just had a call with my boss and was getting promoted. And so my boss said, all right, hold on. Okay, and action. I said, thanks for speaking my language, so then I could go. But it's a cool kind of story. And so what is your story going to be? You're the creator of your destiny. And so I just am grateful that I had enough confidence in myself to come out here. And then, there's people that have left, and that, like my friend who was just here, she's creating a film up in Bainbridge Island. So you don't have to be in LA either to make it happen. And I do think with like the tax incentives and um, just the way that the industry is changing, I heard Chicago, because they have great tax incentives in Chicago, that a lot of production work is happening there. So you have to kind of be able to move with the industry. I have a friend out here who moved to Atlanta when I was in Chicago in 2015. That was the place to be, and he ended up getting this acting spot in Stranger Things, and booking work there, and it kind of revitalized his career. So when he came back to LA, I said, "Oh, this guy's working." Well, he left for Atlanta for a year. Coincidentally, I spoke to that same person who's a great actor and is a lifelong actor and has two kids now. We were out, and they were both, him and his wife were in my wedding, and so um,
Oh,
yeah, so they're close friends. And he was basically saying, I guess his wife was saying, "Oh yeah, you know, Tobias is now on this show and now on Netflix, and it's really cool. And there's a fight scene, and it shows up in the trailer, and all my friends are telling me about it." And I looked at him, and he didn't have excitement in his eyes. And I said, "What's up with you? Like, why aren't you even excited?" He said, "I shot that 4 years ago.
oh,
That's
geez.
like, yeah." He said, "I'm watching the industry and how it's changing." So if you think about it from an actor standpoint, you're only as good as your last job. So he can't promote something that, isn't getting distributed or isn't being seen. And now he has to promote this from 4 years. It's a little bit, it seems out of touch. And so I would say, I did get this advice from JJ Abrams, producing partner. Again, I am a good networker, admittedly. Remember,
Yeah.
how did I meet this guy? I was,
Well, I was going to ask you that. Do your
yeah.
story and then tell me how you met him.
Well, P basically said, whatever you come out here for, stick with that. So if you came out to be an actor, you came out to be a writer, or you came out to be a director, just stick with that. Don't try to cross pollinate. And so at that point, I was, this is kind of embarrassing, but I'll say it. This is what Morgan wants me to say. He doesn't want me to let it. Come on, Holly, let's get I'm drinking you so you tell us how you really feel. Um, but I
Give me the
remember, yeah, I remember, I didn't know, again, if I was in his office, so that was good. But I
dirt.
didn't know, like, if he was into me, or if like this was an opportunity for me to work at their production company, or if this was an opportunity for me to be an actress in one of Bad Robot's upcoming movies. And at the time, they were, doing post production for Star Wars. And so I remember when he said that, I had a choice. I could say, "Oh, I just want to be a mom," or I could have said, "No, I really want to work in production." And I couldn't help it. I said, "I want to be an actress. That's what I want." So if I wanted to continue sacrificing my lifestyle, and then also for me as an aging woman, I would have, probably had to do some type of, augmentation of my face or my body, which by the way, I had no money for. So it was like, how was I going to do that again? Because I didn't sell my soul. But that's really what I had wanted. Um, and I remember he said, "What movie do you, if there was a character in a movie that you identify with, who would it be?" And I said, Frances Ha. And that was Greta Gerwig's like big breakout movie. So I would say watch Frances Ha because that is like was like my experience of being an actress in the aughts. But the way I met this producing partner, which I'll say his name because it was a professional setting and I have no connection with him now, was Brian Burke. And I was working as a assistant at Company 3 for their games department. And there was a Thanksgiving party, and my boss didn't want to go. And I said, "Oh, I'll go." And of course, when I'm there, I am a good networker. I was not going to have JJ Abrams be at a party that I'm at and not say hi. So of course I
Yeah.
introduced myself to JJ Abrams, and then he started asking me like questions about post production, like really intense. Like you would need an engineer to answer these questions. And I was like, and he knew it. And I saw him go like snap his finger or like bat real quick. And then he introduced me to Brian. Um, so that's how I met Brian, Mr. JJ Abrams, who I had never met before. But I will, yeah, I mean, I have a story about that too, but I don't want to go too deep into how we were all kind of interconnected through the Palisades anyway.
Yeah.
Um, but I
Well,
got the
that's
job. I just want to say
that's
one more thing,
what
like
it is. There's all these interconnections all the
there's
time.
interconnections. So when we did that children's show,
Yeah.
one of the girls who was in the play, her dad owned Company 3. And when I was looking to get into, okay, now I need to work on the other side of the industry because I don't want to sell my soul. I don't want to, do a lot of augmentation to my face and my body or whatnot. And I'm heartbroken that my dreams aren't coming true this way. I ended up trying to get a job in the industry because I knew it. And one of the moms from that, for the girls in the show, that's how I got that job being a Hollywood assistant and moving up from games to then the CEO's desk. So I would
Mm.
just say, yeah, it is interconnected. Keep putting yourself out there.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you didn't sell your soul because you've got a beautiful soul, Holly.
Thank you. I
you've,
try.
you've always
Yeah.
you've always been the same in my eyes, and for me, that's if I would have put you against a character in a movie, I think I told you this before, it would have been Audrey Hepburn.
Oh,
Um,
that's so nice. Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, you've definitely got that air about you and that charisma and can I just tell a story about you really quick?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
There was a time, and I think this was in LA when I was, this was 20 years ago. But there was a time that you and I used to call each other right when the other one would think about each other. Like
Yeah,
I would
that's right. I just thought of you. Yeah.
man, I haven't heard from Holly in like a week or two or a month or two. And then dead serious, like 10 minutes later, my phone would ring and it would be you. And it would happen the other way too. Like
That's
you would
right.
think, I wonder what Morgan's up to. And then I would call. Um, so there was one of those phone calls. I had called you and you picked up the phone and you were like, Morgan, it's so good to hear from you. I'm so glad you called. I'm in the middle of doing this and this, and I would really use your help with this. And it's been so crazy because this happened and that happened. And you like went into this whole like monologue. Shit you not. It was like 10 minutes long where you were like updating me on your life. And then you're like, oh, shoot, I got to go. I'll talk to you later. Bye. and, and like the
Yeah.
entire conversation, I did not even say hello because you just like, boo. And to me, that's Holly in a nutshell. That's it's
I've gotten better. That's a little embarrassing. I
better
think
or
I was.
worse. That's like one of my favorite memories of you. I wonder how many other times you've done that to people. I can't be the only one.
There was a time. There was a
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
A
So,
little self-centered. I just want to say that. I mean, that was a
oh
little
no, yeah,
self-centered.
I never took that as like a self-centered thing. It was just like you get so focused. It's like the world
Yeah,
just goes away, and
that has
you're
not
in that
changed.
Hollyland.
That has not changed.
Yeah,
That's the artist, you know, becoming a
yeah,
little obsessed.
yeah. So, I know we're kind of running at the end of our time period here, but I do want to ask you one more thing.
Okay.
So, because I know the answer for me, but I want to check this against your answer. Um, when you first moved out to Los Angeles and you were pursuing acting, and that was the thing you wanted to do, did you know why you wanted to do it? And if you did, has that reason changed?
Yes. I moved out because I wanted to be a movie star. I remember telling somebody that I want to be a movie star. And this is when it gets a little deep, but I wanted that validation. I think I needed that type of validation, whether it was from a father figure or my peers or um, God. I thought that if I had achieved that status, then, you know, God would love me or something like that. And that's obviously changed. Um, and so I like being me. That's now how I've matured, in that I don't really want to play a character that's a badass in the office or the corporate world. Like, I want to be that badass. Like, I'm capable of living in the real world and leading by being me, not being somebody else. And so I think and I started to get there, you know, as an actress and wanting to my work to be great and all those things. But I found myself. And so now, if I were to go back to acting, it would be to be able to tell stories, you know, to be a real storyteller. And I'm grateful I had that experience in Hollywood, because I know that becoming rich and famous doesn't make you a good person. Uh, I know that at the end of the day, the relationships that you make and that you sustain, like ours, over more than 20 years, that's what really matters. And so I would try in my work to convey morals and the true kind of gift of life, and how we can sometimes ignore that because we're human. And so maybe having those moments where we're understanding the gift of life and trying to make sense of that, make the most of it. That's what my work would be as an artist now. Be less about me and more about humanity.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like you took my answer. Like dead serious. I've since I was a kid, all I wanted to do was make movies, and I think I don't know when it changed, but if I'm honest with myself, sometime in my late teens or early 20s, when I decided to take it serious, um, I I made up a motivation, and what it really was validation, like you said. Like, obviously I thought it would be fun as hell, and I thought I could get rich doing it, so bonus. But uh but it was really the validation. Like, I honestly, looking back on it, I tried so hard, and I wanted to make these movies that I didn't want to be famous. I wanted to be able to go to a restaurant and have a private meal, that kind of thing. But I wanted that validation where, if I showed my film at a film festival, there was some sort of standing ovation afterward, or if I went to a party and somebody says, "Hey, what do you do?" I could say, "Oh, I'm a movie director, and I've my film's on Netflix right now," that kind of thing. I wanted that, and I wanted to, I had a ton of stories in my head I wanted to tell, but I wanted that validation, and I think that's really what crushed me after I made those movies, is that I didn't get the validation. There was screenings where I got awards, I got the applause, that kind of thing. It was temporary validation, but there was no permanent door that opened. There was no industry wide recognition. There was no career, and so I told myself I would pause until it felt right, and it's been like 15 years now, and it hasn't felt right yet. But I was dragged into a short film over the summer, by a friend of a friend, and it was so fun. And I knew there would never be any validation from it, but I took it on just to see, like, how would I feel about it. If,
Yeah.
to me, the stakes were low because it wasn't my project that I birthed. It was I was hired to direct, and it was so fun, and I got that bug again, but this time it's totally different because um, I had an honest talk with myself, and I would be totally fine making movies as a hobby, you know, as long as I didn't spend my own money on it and go broke. I could make movies as a hobby and have fun with it and tell the stories that are inside of me, and not worry about where those stories are going. Post them somewhere and ghost them.
Yeah.
Just walk
Detach.
away
Your
and do
ego is
another.
detached from it. Yeah, from the outcome.
Yeah, and part of that, probably a large part of it, is our age. We're in our 40s now. We're established. We figured out
I
who
mean,
we
you may
are.
be in your 40s. I don't know who,
Yeah.
who else
By
you're
the
referring to.
way, according to IMDb, you are my father's age.
And that will never get changed. I have no idea who put that on there, but
It's so funny. I was
that
like
is fine with me.
1962.
Fine with me.
Yeah. Well, for
No
anybody
one
that
will
looks
ever
here,
know my real age.
yeah, yeah. Well, Holly, it's been fun. I'm going to let you get going now. Thank you so much for the talk. It's been incredible. It was so good catching up, and a lot of valuable nuggets of info in there.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. So take care, and we will post the link to the GoFundMe.
Please do. It means so much. Thank you, Morgan.
Thanks, Holly. See ya.
Okay. Bye bye.